Hello everybody, I'm Pastor Steve Green. This is Bread and Word of Faith Church. My wife Penny and I pastor here. Today is Sunday, October 22nd, and I am excited to be with you again today. We're starting a new series. Knowing the Father is the name of the series. The message title today is Understanding the Jews. Our key scripture is Acts chapter 3, verse 22. For Moses truly said to the fathers, the Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from your brethren. Him you shall hear in all things whatever he says to you. So the intended result of today's message, and I find this helpful, and I like to do this, is to, from the very beginning of a message, say what the goal of the message is, because a lot of times with different subjects we're coming at things from different angles, different biblical angles. It may be unclear to the listener, what are we talking about today? Where are we going with this? And so I think it's advantageous to make these things clear from the very beginning, and at least briefly stated. And so our understanding of the message today is the role of Jesus in Jewish identity. That's what we want to do. We want to understand the role of Jesus in Jewish identity. The title is Understanding the Jews. When Moses spoke to the fathers, he was speaking to Jewish people, and he was speaking to Jewish people about Jesus. So, by way of introduction, many people around the world were horrified to learn about the October 7th attack against Israel by the militant Palestinian group Hamas. One result of this attack has been to ignite a surge of conversation in the Christian world. This conversation has always been going on, but it has ignited a surge of conversation in the Christian world about Israel in the plan of God and end times in particular. With this good and necessary conversation comes a flood of ideas, not all of which are scriptural. Ideas that impact our relationship with God and the knowledge of God. The name of the series is Knowing the Father. So ideas that impact our relationship with God and our knowledge of God are especially important. We want to be clear about this. So wading into this conversation right now is not my first choice. I had we're starting this new series today. Prior to the last couple of days, my intention was to go a different direction, and yet in praying about it, I believe the Lord has clearly impressed upon me that we need to go down this road for a while. It's important. It is an opportune time because it is on the front of people's minds, many people's minds. So the message today, to be clear, is not about the attack in Israel. That is what has spurred the conversation, but that's not what our message is about. Our message is about some of the issues involved in this conversation. The message today is not specifically about end times. It's not about stirring up controversy, although there are some controversial issues. It is not a response to individual conversations that my wife Penny and I have had in recent days. Different conversations with different people. It is not about any one of these conversations in particular. It is about an issue that is important for the entire church. There are many people that are thinking about this beyond those involved in these personal conversations. Really, this is important for the entire church around the world. I have a coffee cup here. I don't use it for coffee, but I do use it every day for hot drinks. And I'll show it to you here. There's a message written on it there. I'm not sure if you can read that message. It says, yes, I'm a pastor. This was given to me as a gift years ago. Yes, I'm a pastor. No, that last sermon was not specifically about you. So it says it on the coffee cup right there. No, that last sermon was not specifically about you. So if it says it on the coffee cup, it has to be true. And I want to assure you it is true. We're speaking to a larger issue here, and it's an issue that impacts everybody. So what the message today is number one, it is based on hundreds of scriptures, literally hundreds of scriptures, including entire New Testament books. are about this subject. It's a message about not end times, we said a moment ago, it's a message about all times. And therefore, because end times are part of all times, to that extent it is an end time message. In fact, it is an excellent end time message, although not specifically about that. It is about not stirring up controversy, as we said a moment ago, but it's about diffusing controversy and the settling of our hearts on clearly and repeatedly stated truths from the Bible. It's about, as Paul said, being straightforward about the truth. This is what we want to do today, is be straightforward about the truth. It is about, as Jesus said, knowing the Father, which again is the title of our theme that we're on. So let's jump right in. So a question that I had that over a number of years, including years in which I was a pastor, it was a question that was not being answered for me, and that is, who is a Jew? So I've needed to clear these questions up. Now, talking about Jews is not an uncommon thing in our society. As a whole, outside of the church, people talk about the Jews. Sometimes there is anti-Semitism. Sometimes there are conspiracy theories. The Jews are doing this, the Jews are doing that. So there is a broader conversation about Jews. In the church, there is definitely a conversation about Jews. We hear, for example, about the church in contrast to the Jews, and it's what applies to the church biblically, what applies to the Jews biblically. This is a good and important conversation in the church. So the point is that we're making right now is that the Jews are regularly, be it in the church or out of the church, the Jews as a whole are regularly being referred to in conversation. And the assumption appears to be that we all know who these Jews are. Otherwise, what would be the point of talking about the Jews if we don't know who they are? The Jews. The word nation or nations is found, if we were to look at it from this standpoint, the nation of Israel. What we're doing is we're starting to jump in now. There is so much material on this in the New Testament. We literally could go for hours and hours and hours. So today's message is going to be just beginning to step into it. And there's only so much we can say in the time that we have. I would love, in fact, not only could we go for hours, there's a part of me that would like to do that because we begin to share on any subject, not just this one, but as we're beginning to share on a particular subject, and we're giving one piece of information at a time, which is all we can do, then often in the beginning you are creating more questions than what you're answering. The more you say, the more questions there are. It takes a while to get around to everything. And so I would love to go for an extended period of time. We won't today, but I just want you to know that we can only take this one step at a time. If we're going to talk about the Jews, we need to know what we're talking about. Who are these people? How do we define them? So one phrase that is used today, both historically in the Bible and today in modern times, is the nation of Israel. So there's going to be, in this conversation, a number of places where confusion can come in. So here would be the first one we're going to address, and that is that the word nation, as used in the Bible, generally means something different than what we mean it today. In our modern world, if someone is to say the nation of Israel, what they would most likely be referring to is a country, a geopolitical entity in the Eastern Mediterranean that is known by the name of Israel. It's the country of Israel. That's what we would understand the nation of Israel to be. Biblically, that is not the nation of Israel. Nation is the Greek word ethnos. The word nation is found, or nations, plural, is found 65 times in the King James New Testament, and 61 of those times it's a translation of the Greek word ethnos, which is referring to a person's ethnicity. And so the nation of Israel, as it's used in the Bible, is referring to people who are ethnically Jewish. So it isn't a country in particular, it is a people. and it would include all the people around the world, scattered around the world, that have Jewish blood in them, that are ethnically Jewish. That would be the nation of Israel. And so this is just the first example of things we need to keep straight as we're talking about these issues. What do you mean? If someone was to say the nation of Israel, it would be correct to be talking about the modern country. It would be correct to be talking about the biblical usage of the word, but we just need to understand what it is that we're referring to when we're talking. So now, Jewishness, that's the nation of Israel. Jewishness, biblical perspectives on Jewishness include those who are, and this is not a complete list, there's going to be others, but again, we're constrained by time today, so we're going to work through this as quickly as we can. Biblical perspectives on Jewishness, and those include those who are ethnically Jewish, which would be the nation of Israel that we've just described, those who are ethnically Jewish. That would be one biblical perspective on Jewishness. Another perspective, also biblical, would be religiously Jewish. Those who are religiously Jewish are referred to as Jews. That would be those who adhere to the law of Moses as the biblical authority. Also, there are those who are culturally Jewish. And culturally Jewish would be referring to somebody who possibly is not ethnically Jewish, not religiously Jewish, but they are part of a larger Jewish community. And for example, in that community, the various feasts may be celebrated, like Christmas is celebrated in many parts of the world, but in Jewish communities, there's going to be Jewish feasts that are celebrated, and a person culturally Jewish would enjoy the holiday. It doesn't mean that they have Jewish blood or that they are religiously Jewish, but they're just part of a larger Jewish community. So a person can be one or the other of these three things, or they could be two of the three, or they could be all three. So what is Jewish then? Jewish, there's 7 different permutations here, different ways of identifying Jewishness that are all biblical. There's others we won't mention right now. And so now we don't have a single clear idea of what it is to be Jewish, but it could be a multiplicity of different things. So what is it? How would we know if a person is Jewish, or how Jewish they are exactly? If we were to switch our conversation from the biblical perspective to the modern perspective in the state of Israel, a person can be a citizen of the nation of Israel and be none of the above, not be Jewish at all, and yet be a citizen. Now, they discourage that, and it's not the easiest thing in the world, but it is possible. So because a person today is a citizen of Israel, that would not mean that they were at all Jewish. Now, the Jewish state does take an interest in Jewishness, and so they have laws that define what it is to be a Jew. And it boils down to 2 particular tests. And if you pass either one of these 2 tests, then in the eyes of the state of Israel, you are considered to be a Jew. And the first test is ethnic, and the second test is religious. And again, you don't need both, you just need one or the other. So the ethnic test for Jewishness, according to Jewish law, is Jewish law meaning Israeli law, as I'm using it right now, is that your mother needs to be Jewish, and that's it. Just that simple. Your mother needs to be Jewish. So let's take a closer look at this. Say we were to go back in time, and we have a woman who is ethnically 100% Jewish, and that can be documented. She is pure-blooded Jew. She's 100% ethnically Jewish, and she marries a man who is 0% Jewish, and so they have a daughter, let's say, and so this daughter now is going to be 50% Jewish. Now, my understanding of genetics is that it's not quite as simple as that the percentage can vary. It might not be 50% exactly, but we won't get into those details for our purposes today. We'll say that the daughter is 50% Jewish. Now, as it happens, according to Israeli law, 50% is irrelevant to the discussion. She is not Jewish. She's not considered Jewish because she's 50% ethnically Jewish. She is Jewish because her mother was. So now, let's say this girl grows up and she gets married, and like her mother, she marries a man who has 0% Jewish ethnicity, and they also have a daughter. So now this girl is 25% Jewish. Now again, 25% is an irrelevant number because according to law, what makes her Jewish is the fact her mother was Jewish. So her mother's Jewish, so she is now Jewish. So let's say she grows up also and marries a man that is 0% Jewish, and they also have a daughter. Now that daughter is now 12.5% Jewish by ethnicity, but by Jewish law she is a Jew 100%. Again, it has nothing to do with the 12.5%. It has everything to do with the fact her mother was or is Jewish. So we can follow that right down the line. We can get right down to 1% Jewish and still considered to be Jewish. And if the mother is Jewish, now we've been following the female side of the line, but this would have an impact on the male side also. It's the mother that determines whether a person is Jewish or not the father. But if a person's mother is Jewish, then whether you are a daughter or a son of that woman, then you are Jewish. So what we would have then is people that are perhaps 1% Jewish or a fraction of 1% Jewish, and they would be considered to be Jewish. Now let's back up again and start from the beginning and follow a different track. Let's say a woman marries who is 0% Jewish, marries a man who is 100% ethnically Jewish, and they have a daughter, and this daughter is now going to be 50% Jewish by ethnicity, but her mother was not Jewish, so she is not Jewish, even though she's 50% Jewish by ethnicity. Say she was now, or this daughter now, 50% Jewish, now grows up, marries a man who is 100% Jewish, like the man, like her father. She marries a man who's 100% Jewish, and they in turn have a daughter who is now 75% Jewish because the father's 100%, the mother's 50%. In the eyes of Jewish law, this 75% Jewish person is not Jewish at all because they are, their mother was not Jewish. So you can have two people standing in the state of Israel today. You can have two people standing one beside the other, one who is 75% Jewish by ethnicity and is not considered Jewish by the state, and another person who is 1% Jewish by ethnicity, and they are considered Jewish by the state. So, well, this is interesting. I would say interesting. So now, we could look at Jesus, for example. Now, in the genealogy of Jesus that's found in Matthew, we see the genealogy running from over a course of 2,000 years from Abraham to Jesus, different generations. In that 2,000-year time period, it is men that are mentioned, one man after another after another. There are also 4 women mentioned. The 4 women are Tamar, Rahab, Ruth, and Bathsheba. Now, so these are women in the genealogy of Jesus who all happen to be Gentiles. The only other woman mentioned in this listing of this genealogical listing is Mary, the mother of Jesus herself, who of course was a Jew. But these other 4 women were all Gentiles. And these 5 are the only women that are mentioned. There might be other women in there that are also Gentiles. So Jesus had Gentile blood in him. Now, that would mean that not that he isn't Jewish, he was Jewish, but he wasn't 100% Jewish ethnically. Tamar was a Canaanite, Rahab was a Canaanite, Ruth was a Moabite, Bathsheba was a Hittite. They were Gentiles. So, what does that mean? What does it mean? How much Gentile blood do you need to be a Gentile? How much Jewish blood do you need to be a Jew? These questions are not being answered. So this is what I mean. Over the years, these are questions. I'm hearing people talk about the Gentiles and the Jews, hearing people talk about the church and the Jews. but nobody was defining, at least not for me, not in conversation or in preaching to me, nobody was defining what is a Jew exactly. Now, I think, as all of us do, I felt like I knew, I thought like I knew, it seemed like I had a feel for what a Jewish person was, but when it came right down to it, technically, I could not tell you precisely what a Jew was, either from a secular standpoint, the state of Israel, or from a biblical standpoint. So now, switching. So then if we're not going to come at this, or if we're going to come at this partly from an ethnic standpoint, but also partly from a religious standpoint, as the Bible does, then in the Jewish world, in Jewish religion, or Judaism, which would be the same thing, which does not accept, Jewish religion does not accept Jesus as the Messiah. This Jewish religion is broadly divided into three groups. So now we're coming at this from a religious standpoint. Who is a Jew? We're still trying to answer that question. Orthodox Judaism would be the first of the classifications of religious Judaism. It is the most true, Orthodox Judaism is the most true to the law of Moses. Judaism, by definition, regards the law of Moses as the basis, as the biblical authority, and not Jesus, as we said a moment ago. So Orthodox Judaism would be the one that follows the law of Moses most closely. It enjoys special status in the modern country of Israel. The Western Wall, you've heard of the Western Wall, it has separate sections for men and women to pray, because that's what you would need to have according to Orthodox Judaism. In the synagogue, the men would be on one side, women on the other. There's not mixed worship in Orthodox Judaism. Only Orthodox synagogues have the right to conduct Jewish marriages. There are other legal marriages in Israel, but if you want a Jewish marriage, it would have to be in an Orthodox synagogue. Now, separate from Orthodox Judaism, there is Reform Judaism, and that's the other end of the spectrum. Whereas Orthodox most closely follows the law of Moses, Reform Judaism is the most liberal. It is the branch of Judaism that is most making the effort to be like the world that is surrounding the synagogue. They would be liberal in their interpretation of the law of Moses. And then there is conservative Judaism, which is between the two. That would be for people that don't exactly want to have to follow the law of Moses, but would like the feel of it. There are laws we take seriously. And so those are the three main branches of Orthodox Judaism. And of course, there's subgroups and subgroups to the subgroups, and you know how that is. So there again, it's what is a Jew? What is a Jew ethnically, precisely? What is a Jew religiously? Does Reform Judaism count? What does Orthodox Judaism count for? How important are these things? In grappling with the question, so this brought me to the point where I was grappling with the question of what is a Jew, who is a Jew. The Lord said something to me. Now I'm going to tell you what He said to me, but I'm not asking you to believe that He said that just because I'm telling you. I want you to check it out scripturally. The value of what I'm about to say would be if it stacks up in light of Scripture. So what Jesus said to me was, or what the Lord said to me, is He said, view the question through the lens of Judaism. And it'll help clear things up for you. And when I did that, it worked marvelously. It gave instant clarity because viewing the issue of who is a Jew, what is a Jew, through the law of Moses or through Judaism, makes it clearly defined, because the law of Moses is clearly defined. There are 613 different commands, and they are black and white. Do this, don't do that, don't do that. So now, instead of the human coming at it from the human perspective, which is just so fluid and variable, 3,500 years of history since Moses, I don't know my genealogy. Do you? How does a person know? Maybe I'm a Jew. Maybe people that are Jews feel that they are, maybe it turns out they're more Gentile than what they thought. I mean, who knows? This is a confusing issue. But what is not confusing is what the law of Moses said. So this is a lens through which we can speak and think clearly about this subject. Not only that, but the contrast between a Jew and a Christian, what makes Christianity and Jewish religion different, not the same religion, but two different religions, also becomes very clear when we view Jewish identity through the lens of the law of Moses. So let's have a look at this. This is what we're going to do. One of the things that we're going to see is that biblically Jewish identity is associated with ethnicity, but like the state of Israel acknowledges, it is also related to covenant. They are a covenant people of God. So let's have a look at this. When we say to look at it through the lens of Judaism, we could also say let's look at it through the lens of covenant. That would be another way of saying it. So Exodus 24, finally, we get to looking at the scriptures. Exodus 24 verse 3, so Moses came and told the people all the words of the Lord. This is Mount Sinai now. And told the people all the words of the Lord and all the judgments. And all the people, so this is where covenant was made between God and Israel. And all the people answered with one voice and said, all the words which the Lord has said we will do. So here is where the covenant is ratified. It's agreed to by all parties involved. The people said, we will do this. So now that didn't work out very well. Soon after this, there was the whole, fiasco of entering the promised land, and God said yes, and the people said no, and they ended up being in the wilderness for 40 years, all of that. But then that 40 years expires, and now all the people that were 20 years or older at the time of this Exodus 24 are now dead, and now we have a new generation. And so the Israelites come to the plains of Moab, which is on the outskirts of the promised land. And there, God decides to, once again, as he did 40 years before at Mount Sinai, he wants to do again, which is review all the terms of the covenant. So we're all agreed. We have a new generation now. Everybody needs to be up to date on what the covenant agreement between God and Israel is. And so they do that. In the book of Deuteronomy, they go over that. So we read in Deuteronomy 31 and verse 16, and the Lord said to Moses, behold, you will rest with your fathers, and this people, and again, it's the people, are being defined in terms of the covenant they have with God. And this people will rise and play the harlot with the gods of the foreigners of the land, where they go to be among them. And they will forsake me and break my covenant, which I have made with them. So Moses has just finished going over all the terms of the covenant, the 613 different commands. And now, and as, maybe not as they're walking away, but shortly thereafter, God says to him, they're not going to do this. This whole covenant thing, it is doomed from the beginning. It's not going to work. It's just, they're not going to do it. They haven't done it for the past 40 years. They are not going to do it in the future. So now this law and the relationship with the law is becoming a framework through which the people of Israel or the Jewish people can be understood, certainly from the perspective of the mind of God. We come over to the New Testament, John 7 and verse 19, and this is Jesus speaking to the Jewish people now. So we're fast forwarding 1,500 years from the time of Moses to the time of Jesus, and Jesus is speaking of Moses. He says, did not Moses give you the law? Yet none of you keeps the law. So Jesus is saying to Jewish people, actually, same thing God had said 1,500 years before. Jesus is saying now, there's really nobody that keeps this law. That's John 7. Acts chapter 7, verses 37 to 39, and then we'll skip ahead to 51 to 53. This is Stephen speaking before the Sanhedrin. He said, this is that Moses. So again, just like Jesus, he's referring back to the the beginnings of this Mosaic covenant this is that Moses who said to the children of Israel, "The Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from your brethren." So Moses said that. He told them that there would be a prophet, capital P, raised up from among their brethren, prophesying about Jesus. And then Stephen goes on to continue quoting the verse, "Him you shall hear." And this is he, Stephen is saying, Moses, who was in the congregation in the wilderness with the angel who spoke to him on Mount Sinai and with our fathers. The one who received, this is Moses, the one who received the living oracles to give us, whom our fathers would not obey but rejected. And so the point Stephen is making is that Moses was rejected by the children of Israel. In their hearts, they turned back to Egypt. That's what Stephen said. In verse 51, he continues, "You stiff-necked and uncircumcised and hardened ears, you always resist the Holy Spirit. As your fathers did, so do you. Which of the prophets did your fathers not persecute?" What he's saying is, from the very beginning, they did not follow Moses. 1,500 years ahead, they are still not following Moses because they killed Jesus. Moses said, "You will need to hear him in everything he says," and instead they are killing him. They're still getting it wrong. And then he's saying, in all the 1,500 years in between, you were killing the prophets which were prophesying of this same Messiah. So he says, "And they killed, which of the prophets did your fathers not persecute? And they killed those who foretold the coming of the just one, of whom you now have become the betrayers and murderers, who have received the law by the direction of angels and have not kept it." And so this whole covenant thing worked very poorly. This law of Moses worked very poorly for the Jewish people. In Galatians 6:13, "For not even those who are circumcised keep the law." So this is a drumbeat here. It's being said by Stephen, said by Jesus, said by Paul, not even those who are circumcised. Now some might say, well, the problem isn't the Jewish people as a whole, it's the leaders in particular. It's these religious leaders that are the problem. But that's not what Paul said. He said he stopped talking of all the people that are circumcised, all the people that have the sign of covenant with God of circumcision. None of them keep the law. So we read in Romans 3:20 now, Paul saying, "Therefore by the deeds of the law no flesh will be justified in his sight." So the law was never, right from the beginning, God said they're not going to keep it. There's nobody who has been justified by the law. It cannot be the case, for by the law is the knowledge of sin. So that's what the law is good for. There is a function for the law, and that is it exposes sin in the heart of the person who's trying to do it. All right, so now we come to Luke 19, verses 41 to 44. Speaking of Jesus, "Now as he drew near, he saw the city, Jerusalem, and wept over it, saying, 'If you had known, even you, especially in this your day,'" and that day being the day of the prophet that Moses had prophesied, prophet with a capital P, Jesus himself, "in this your day, especially in this your day, the things that make for your peace, but now they are hidden from your eyes. For days will come upon you when your enemies will build an embankment around you, surround you and close you in on every side, and level you and your children within you to the ground, and they will not leave in you one stone upon another, because you did not know the time of your visitation." That was the visitation promised by Moses. So they claim to follow Moses, but they're missing Moses in a big way. What Jesus prophesied of here was about 30 AD when he prophesied it. 40 years later, in 70 AD, the Romans under their general Titus came and they ransacked the city, they destroyed it, they leveled the temple. Not one stone was, as Jesus said, not one stone was left upon another. And since that day, there has not been a temple for Israel. Now, according to the law of Moses. There are 613 different commands. That number can vary depending on who's counting, just by a little bit here or there. It depends how you divide verses exactly. But the standard number is 613. 342 of these require for a temple to be in existence in order to keep these. So that means that most of the law of Moses cannot be kept today because there is no temple. The altar, for example, you can't just build an altar anywhere. It has to be the altar associated with the temple. You don't have a temple, you don't have an altar, so you can't make any blood sacrifices, that sort of thing. So that means 271 of the 613 are possible for a person to do today, but 26 of them require being physically present in the land of Israel. And so because most of us are not right now physically present in the land of Israel, that would mean that we're down to 245 that can be done today. So 40%, that would be 40% of the law of Moses, is possible to be performed. So that's a grim state of affairs. In Acts chapter 3, now let's come back to a scripture that we've seen quoted by Stephen, and now we'll see it again here in Acts chapter 3, this time by Peter. This is not the day of Pentecost, but a day shortly after, where once again he is preaching to a multitude of Jews. He says, "For Moses truly said to the fathers, the Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from your brethren. Him you shall hear in all things, whatever he says to you." That's Moses speaking to the Jewish people. "And it shall be that every soul who will not hear that prophet shall be utterly destroyed from among the people." That was when there were many Jews that repented that day upon hearing that. So the verse Stephen is quoting from, and Peter, would be Deuteronomy 18. Let's go back there and read exactly what Moses said in verse 15 and then verses 18 and 19. "The Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from your midst, from your brethren. Him you shall hear." That's what Stephen said. That's what Peter said. Verse 18, "I will raise up for them a prophet like you." Now this is God talking here. "I will raise up for them a prophet like you, like Moses, from among their brethren, and will put my words in his mouth, and he shall speak to them all that I command him." All of this is referring to Jesus. "And it shall be that whoever will not hear my words, which he speaks in my name, I will require it of him." Require it of him, meaning there's going to be consequences. If you don't hear it, there's going to be consequences. But that's not exactly how Peter quoted it. Peter did not just say that there would be consequences. He described exactly what the consequences would be. And the way he did that is he took part of his quotation from Deuteronomy 18, but he took another part from Leviticus 23. Let's read that. So what Peter is doing, the word they use for this is conflating, meaning you could take two different things and combine them together. So he's quoting from Deuteronomy 18 and at the same time quoting from Leviticus 23, verses 28 to 30, and he says, "And you shall do no work on that same day." Now he's talking about what appears to be a different subject entirely, the Day of Atonement, which is the holiest day out of 365. I'm not sure about the Jewish calendar, if it's 365 like ours is, but out of all those days, it's the holiest day on the Jewish calendar. So what's being told to the Israelites here is, "And you shall do no work on that same day, for it is the Day of Atonement." It is not the weekly Sabbath, but it is a Sabbath. It's even a more important Sabbath than the weekly Sabbath. "You shall do no work on that day, for it is the Day of Atonement, to make atonement for you before the Lord your God." Verse 29, "For any person who is not afflicted in soul on that same day shall be cut off from his people. And any person who does any work on that same day, that person I will destroy from among his people." So this is very serious business now. So in other words, if a person defiles the Day of Atonement, this is what's being said in Leviticus 23. If a person defiles the Day of Atonement, they will actually, even though they're ethnically Jewish, even though they're religiously Jewish, they will in fact covenantally they will cease to be Jewish. They will lose their, in this respect, they will lose their Jewishness. They will no longer be within God's covenant. That's extremely serious, as you know. And so what Peter does is he takes that verse describing a person defiling the Day of Atonement and uses it to describe the person who does not accept Jesus as their prophet, the one that they hear in all things, whatever he says to them. Let's read how Peter said that again. For Moses truly said to the fathers, the Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from your brethren. Him you shall hear in all things, whatever he says to you. And it shall be that every soul, this is pretty clear, every soul who will not hear that prophet shall be utterly destroyed from among the people. That's how Peter said it. So then, this is just the beginning. We're just beginning to wade into this subject. There's so much biblical material on it. So let's finish with this. And we're going a little bit longer today than what I often go, but just 3 more verses. So now, let's see what Jesus has to say about this. We're going to quote from Jesus here on this subject of covenant and now we're looking at being a Jew from a religious standpoint or from a covenant, from a biblical standpoint. We want to hear what Jesus has to say about it, and we're going to read something that Jesus says that occurs 16 times. I found 16 different places where the same thing is said, slightly different wording, but it's the same thing being said 16 different times. 11 of those times are Jesus himself saying it. There's going to be other times where it is somebody else stating the same truth. In all the times, all 11 times that Jesus is stating this truth, he's stating it to Jewish people, so the context is really clear. So we're going to see what we're going to look at today, and we're going to finish because it's time for us to finish. But what we're going to look at today is one of the 11 times that Jesus makes this statement, and we're going to look at 2 other times, just because they're short and quick, and it'll be a way to efficiently come to the end of the message. So in Luke 6:10, verse 16, now this is Jesus speaking to the 70 disciples as distinct from the 12, and these are Jewish disciples, of course. Jesus says to them, he who hears you hears me, and he who rejects you rejects me, and he who rejects me rejects him who sent me. So what Jesus said, that anybody that does not accept Jesus is not only rejecting Jesus, but also rejecting the Father. And if they don't have Jesus, they also don't have the Father, which is Jesus saying the same thing that we just read Peter saying. It's very, very strong language, very severe in its meaning, but it's very clear also. It's what Peter said not long after the day of Pentecost, and it is what Jesus is saying here. Now, let's go to 1 John, to the epistles of John the Apostle. In 1 John chapter 2, verse 23, he says, whoever denies the Son does not have the Father either. And so this is a message to the Jewish people. Now, Judaism, by definition, is a rejection of Jesus as the biblical authority. That's what Judaism is. So, and Judaism is as we've been looking at today, perhaps more than anything else, what defines the Jewish identity. And so John the Apostle is saying, whoever denies the Son does not have the Father either. In 2 John chapter 1 and verse 9, John says, whoever transgresses and does not abide in the doctrine of Christ does not have God. He who abides in the doctrine of Christ has both the Father and the Son. So if we are a follower of Christ, we have the Father and the Son. If a person is not a follower of Christ, they have neither the Father or the Son. So this, this is, again, this is very sobering. So what's the point? We need to understand that Jesus is and always will be the only way to the Father. We remember John 14:6. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except by me. To have a relationship with the Father requires a relationship with Jesus. So that means that all those who follow Jewish religion, endeavoring to have a relationship with the Father, in fact, have no relationship with the Father at all. They have no knowledge of the Father. That is what Jesus said in one of the other verses that we're not going to take the time today to look at it. So what is the significance of this? Is we In this day, and we started by talking about the attack against Israel. So in this day in which we are having compassion on the Jewish people, and we most definitely are having compassion on the Jewish people. They are surrounded by enemies, enemies that would like to, and this is clearly stated, they would like to drive them into the sea. They would like to destroy the country of Israel, or as we would say today, the nation of Israel. They would like to eliminate it from the face of the earth. They are surrounded by people like this. They have this narrow sliver of land they have to defend. They are the historic people of God, and we believe that they have a future with God. God has a future for them. We look to them as a time clock for end time events. As our hearts open to the Jewish people, which they rightfully need to be open to the Jewish people, as we love them, as we pray for them, as we are rooting for them in this time, let us also stay firm on the fact that the only future for any of us, be it Jew or Gentile, the only future that anybody has with God is through Jesus. We need to keep that in mind, or else in our love for the Jewish people, it is possible for us to get off track in our own understanding of what relationship with God is. And we want to be able to cover all the bases here. We need to be able to love the Jewish people, but even more importantly, we need to love God. And we need to be on track, in agreement with, very soundly established upon His Word. All right, that's enough for today, 45 minutes. Bless you. Thank you for being with us. Again, there is so much on this subject, and we will endeavor to do a good job of presenting it. All right, talk to you later.